Hello, this is Bernie Gigas, and this is part 3 of the Lake Ontario St. Lawrence River hydrology update from late October, early November 2021. And part 3 covers Plan 2014 Phase 2 review, what I'm hoping to get out of that and what I think we should be pushing for. It's important to note that what follows is my opinion, not necessarily fact or something that the IJC or the River Board looks at the same way. Let me get into the material. In discussing Plan 2014 Phase 2 review, I want to make sure and be clear that what follows is largely my opinion. It is pretty technical, and some of this is really geared towards GLAM and the IJC, but I felt it important to share with the public in general. As we talk about Plan 2014 rule and limit changes, the GLAM committee has used Condition J of the Supplementary Order of Approval quite extensively. We've had tests on F-limit deviations, L-limit, I-limits, and various other operational parameters to see what boundaries can be pushed. GLAM has been quite active in this, and opportunities do exist. An upper F-limit protecting downstream, irrespective of upstream level, is untenable. This must be revised to fairly adjust for past and future supply extremes. That one's pretty straightforward in my mind. There may be opportunity to increase the L-limit plus 200 cubic meters per second seasonally. In other words, we may be able to do this during the summer, but not in the fall when we have high wind conditions. Something like that. It's under consideration. Next, based on 2020 and 2021 experience, we may be able to revise the I-limit during stable ice. We may be able to push more water in winter than we've really attempted to in the past, or have regularly attempted to in the past. And then next, the upper H14 criteria is 248.13 feet in early June. That's above flood stage. At minimum, this needs to be reduced to 247.7 feet to reflect the onset of flooding. That to me is a critical point that we need to push for. If we wait until we hit H14 before we react with the deviations, it's too late. Because as has been pointed out over and over again, we cannot adjust quickly. All of these parameters have been talked about before. All of these parameters have been identified, but none of this addresses the base rule curve. And this is where the complexity of the system comes in. So let's start again by taking a look at current conditions. Let's revisit that. In October 2021, the level has been higher than October 2020. That's right off the board plots. At the same time, in October 2021, outflow is lower than October 2020. Let me put this side by side, and these are now my plots. In October 2020, the outflow was limited by the L limit. And yet, at the same and lower level than we have in 2021, the outflow was higher than we currently have. We currently have higher level and lower outflow in 2021 than we had in 2020, despite the element being in effect in 2020. Why is that? In order to understand that, you need to go to the 52-week look back for supply adjustment in the way that Plan 2014 calculates expected or set outflow. And this is a function of net total supply. So that's the supply adjustment. In July, August, and September, NTS net total supply was similar between 20 and 2021. That's July, August, September. However, if you take a look at the earlier part of the year, in 2020, January through June total supply was much higher than it was in 2021. Those 6 months earlier this year affect how much flow we have going out now, irrespective of where the lake level actually is. And the intent of this is to provide variability in lake level year to year, which environmentally is a good thing. So the concept of what's being done here is good. The question is, does the plan as written actually accomplish that goal in a way that makes sense? Let me explain this a little bit differently, or try to explain this a little bit differently. In this plot, in the top left-hand corner, you see a blue line and an orange line. The orange line is the base rule curve. It is the calculation of how much water would be let out of Lake Ontario if the dam did not exist at that level. So it's the equivalent of pre-project conditions, pre-project outflow. The blue line is the actual outflow, and the blue line is generally higher than the orange line, which means we generally pass more water out of the system under high water conditions that we currently have than would occur naturally before the dam was built. The difference between that blue line and the orange line is now plotted in this larger plot. The black line is when we pass exactly, so this big, thick black line here is when we pass exactly as much water as would have been let out prior to the dam's construction. The blue line here shows you the difference between what would have occurred naturally versus what actually happens, which versus the set point. So that set point has been higher in 2017 through 2021 because of the high water conditions. That yellow line is the median. 50% of the blue dots, or blue portion of the blue graph, is above the yellow line, and 50% is below. Now, what's striking about this, besides the variability, which does make sense, but what's striking about this is the period in summer of 2020 here and summer of 2021 here. The additional amount let out in 2020 was higher than the additional amount let out in 2021. That is because of the 52-week look back, where Plan 2014 sets discharge based on what happened a year ago. Unweighted, unbalanced, it looks at the entire year. In a changing environment, Plan 2014 overcorrects in reducing supply environments and undercorrects in increasing supply environments. The conclusion of that is that the 52-week look back should be refined. If that is not refined, when you have high cyclic changes in water supply, like we've had in 2021, for example, we undercorrect on the way up and overcorrect on the way down. Getting that right would give us mitigation on how high the water would have gone in 2017 and 19. Does not mean that we would not have flooded. This is not the difference between 249 feet and 246 feet, but it's potentially the difference between 249 feet and 248.5 feet. We would still have flooded, we would have just flooded less. I wanted to say that because I don't want people to conclude that, see, Plan 2014 caused the floods. Plan 2014 did not cause the flood. We would have flooded anyway, but we can mitigate it a little bit better. That's what I'm going to push for in Phase 2 of Plan 2014 review. In summary, I've talked about the current conditions slightly above long-term average. The spring 2022 flood risk is moderate. It's higher than 2021. However, until we get through November and December, it is too early to predict that we're going to flood in 2022. The board is aware of this. They are indeed doing what they can. I talked about Plan 2014 Phase 1 review being complete and what I believe to be a good tool in the decision support tool that hopefully will be operationalized here very quickly so that it can be used, or hopefully not used, for deviation decisions in the future. And then finally, I spent a bit of time on Plan 2014 Phase 2 review that has started with GLAM, not with the Public Advisory Group just yet. This will look at relevant limits and base rule curves. to be discussed. Expect that process to take 3 years, and you know where my head's at with respect to the things that should be looked at and the things that should be changed. Thank you for your time and your attention.